Good morning. I'm Jasmine Tyler, Executive Director of the Justice Policy Institute, and I want to thank you for joining us to discuss a human rights crisis that led the Justice Policy Institute to release a new report, A Moment in Reckoning. This is a policy blueprint that outlines urgent reforms to address safety concerns, to end prolonged solitary confinement, to create pathways for release, and to truly overhaul New York State prisons. This is, of course, in response to the 22-day illegal prison strike that has left at least 9 people dead and tens of thousands of people in prolonged isolation and lockdown. This morning, you are going to hear from U.S. Congress member Nydia Velázquez. You are also going to hopefully hear from Assembly Member Chris Burdick, whose district includes the Bedford Hills prison. You might also hear from other lawmakers. We are also joined by Justice Policy Institute partners Victor Pate, who is a survivor of solitary confinement and who now is the Halt Solitary Campaign co-director. You're also going to hear from Stanley Bellamy, who served 37 and a half years before receiving executive clemency from Governor Hochul. And now he serves as community organizer at the Release Aging People in Prison campaign. And finally, we're going to hear from Thomas Grant, who is community organizer with the Community Center for Community Alternatives and the Communities Not Cages campaign. First, let me provide you some background, though, on why Justice Policy Institute is releasing A Moment of Reckoning. You may know, but you must hear that New York's prison system is in a crisis with rampant officer brutality, illegal lockdowns, and blatant human rights violations. The brutal killings of Robert Brooks and Messiah Nantwi and the massive lockdowns caused by this illegal 22-day strike underscore the urgent need for reform. A Moment of Reckoning, our blueprint, it lays out a clear evidence-based list of solutions to improve safety, to reduce harm, and to create meaningful rehabilitation opportunities. Also, to create meaningful pathways for release, a critical component. The brutal killings have also given us cause to revisit the moral imperative for addressing solitary confinement. Solitary confinement and these abusive conditions do not improve prison safety. They make prisons more dangerous. If New York is serious about public safety, it must invest in rehabilitation, oversight, and transparency, not more punishment and suffering. Our report lays out clear solutions, and we cannot allow this moment to pass. Lawmakers, administrators, you must act now to address this crisis in the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. The key recommendations are to end prolonged solitary confinement and fully implement the Halt Solitary Confinement Law, prevent violence in prisons by establishing proven violence prevention programming and expanding peer-led rehabilitation efforts. Again, expanding pathways for release, passing elder parole, fair and timely parole, and the Second Look Act to create meaningful case-by-case release mechanisms. And you must hold corrections officers accountable for their actions. We have to end qualified immunity for abusive prison staff and shut down facilities that have documented histories of misconduct. Next, we're going to hear from Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, who is also deeply concerned about this.
I'm sorry. Good morning,
Congresswoman.
everyone. And thank you, Jasmine, for having me. And thank you to all the stakeholders and the entire community and the state of New York for addressing this important issue. Um, Particularly the Justice Policy Institute for putting together this critical report. This is truly a moment of reckoning, and your work lays out exactly what must be done to confront the deep injustices in our prison system. New York's prison system is in a state of emergency. The tragic death of Robert Brooks and Messiah Nantwi, along with illegal work stoppage, have exposed deep injustices, rampant abuse, solitary confinement violations, and a system that prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation. This is not justice. Formerly incarcerated people have spoken out, telling us this brutality is not an exception, but a pattern. We hear you, we see you, and we know this system must change, and it must change now. This report lays out the necessary solutions. First, we must fully enforce the whole solitary law. No more illegal suspensions, no more excuses. Solitary confinement is torture, plain and simple, and it must end. Second, we need real violence prevention programs run by independent experts, not more isolation and abuse. Third, we must expand clemency, elder parole, fair and timely parole, and the Second Look Act, so people are not left to die in prison. We must also restore family care packages and expand contact visits because rehabilitation and healing require human connection. And finally, there must be accountability. The senseless brutality that led to Robert Brooks' death should never have happened. The disturbing reports surrounding Messiah Nantwi's death must be fully investigated. Prison officials cannot operate in the shadows. Transparency, oversight, and consequences for misconduct are essential to restoring trust and integrity in our correctional system. This is about justice. It's about replacing a system built on cruelty and dehumanization with one that fosters rehabilitation, accountability, and healing. We have the evidence, we have the solutions. Now we must act. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your words and your guidance. It's really important to hear that. I just want to make another statement before we hear from Victor Pate, and that is that we want to encourage all of our journalists who are joining us to ensure that you are using people first language when you are covering this issue. And that is really important to us. And not only that, but legislation has been passed in New York to ensure that. So next, I am going to pass it over to Victor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, and thank you for everyone who has joined us on this platform. And I'd first like to start with saying, as a healing survivor of solitary confinement myself, the collateral damages of being exposed in solitary confinement never ever goes away. I've been home for 25 years now, and my experience and what happened to me while I was in solitary confinement has not completely gone away, so I consider myself a healing survivor of solitary confinement. And I'd start off with solitary confinement is torture, and it works in safety for all and everyone. The solitary confinement law was passed by a supermajority of both houses of the New York State Legislature, and docs must fully implement the Halt law immediately to use real alternatives proven to reduce violence. Now, I'm going to quickly, just a little quick addendum to this here in terms of what has and is happening in regards to the correctional officer strike. We all know that all that was a distraction in the aftermath of the brutal, vicious murder of Robert Brooke to take away from the fact that they got caught on camera. I, as well as others that have been incarcerated, know that this is historical. It has been happening. There are countless other deaths and murders that have gone unreported. They are and have created free adequate conditions. And when they say that the facilities are unsafe for them, I beg to differ for that. And there's a lot of different components that point to the passage of the Halt Solitary Confinement Bill would make it safer for staff as well as those that are incarcerated. And we need to fully implement the Halt Solitary Confinement law now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stanley.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Stanley Bellamy. I'm not just only formerly incarcerated, I'm an impacted family member who has a brother serving a 52.5 years to life sentence who's still incarcerated. Went in at the age of 20 and within 3 months will be turning 40 years old. So when I speak to you, I'm speaking to you from experience of having served time and watched the brutality that takes place inside these incarcerated systems. And I'm talking firsthand knowledge of seeing what's going on when people are being charged with assault, when in actuality, they was the ones assaulted. And I always say that had Robert Brooks' murder not been caught on tape and had he lived, he would have been charged with assaulting 18 officers and placed in solitary confinement. And also he might have been subject to outside charges. So when we talk about this system in its totality, we need to address the brutality and abuse that take place. And at the same time in doing that, we need to also create pathways for individuals to come home on a case-by-case basis, give them an opportunity to make their case for release. Every night since this strike started, I've been receiving phone calls from mothers, wives, sisters, brothers, whoever can reach me, telling me what's going on to their incarcerated family member. And lastly, last night, I received a list of demands from the brothers and sisters on the inside. And when we talk about safety, we talk about creating a safe environment. Their demands is all about safety, their safety and the safety of the correctional officers and staff that's working in the facility. But one of the things that they said, and then I'm gonna give it back to you, Jasmine, is that they said the Halt Solitary Confinement Act, the Halt Act needs to be fully implemented. It has never been fully implemented. And we talking about its effectiveness. The only way we can determine if it actually works if it is fully implemented, not repealed, not suspended, not taking portions out, fully implement Halt. And then let's make a determination, go back and analyze if it's working. That's one of their demands. And I'll pass it back to you, Jasmine.
Stanley, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing messages from our friends, families, loved ones, and community members who are incarcerated currently. It's very important to hear from them. Next, we are going to hear from Thomas. So please take it away.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here. I wish it was under better circumstances. Thomas Gant, community organizer for the Center for Community Alternatives. And I'm also formerly incarcerated. And I served 25 years of incarceration, and I've been home a little over 2.5 years. But I want to talk about the state and the place and climate that we're in with New York State's prisons, and also offer a remedy. We have the remedy, our Communities Not Cages campaign, which is made up of 3 very transformative sentence reform bills. These bills will give hope to incarcerated folks. They will make prisons safer, and more importantly, prepare our family and loved ones to come home in a more productive, meaningfully way so they can contribute out here. And so those 3 bills are the Earned Time Act, which will incentivize good behavior and program productivity. A person can earn time off of their sentence based on the programs that they participate in. This expands on a good and merit time that is already in existence, and this will allow our loved ones to work towards being productive. This, in turn, makes prisons safer. If the claim from opposition is that prisons are unsafe, well, here's the answer. Provide more productive programming. Allow folks to have hope at a chance at coming home, and people will do it. I can speak from an empirical standpoint and say that I know that when I was participating in programs, this is where the aha moments happen for me. This is where I want to change my life, where I want to change my environment and also give back. And as a latent consequence, folks that participate in these programs can come home and put these things to use. The other one's the second look at. The second look at will address the archaic sentencing structures that people have been sentenced to. Most folks in prison have been sentenced to outdated sentences, and this is a way to address this. After a person have done at least 10 years, they can petition a judge to get re-seen and re-looked at. This gives New York State a mechanism to address some of the unjust harms that has been done based off of the 94 crime bill, and a chance to have folks to get looked at again. This mechanism that we are presenting has also had the endorsement of Chief Judge Ron Wilson and several others. We have people in the Department of Corrections. Former Commissioner Brian Fisher has also supported. Dozens of laborers, over 200 organizations in support of a mechanism like this that will give folks an opportunity to get looked at again, and then get a chance to be released. And then we have the Marvin Mayfield Act. The Marvin Mayfield Act is the bill that is designed to give judges more discretion when they sentence folks. We know that judges don't even want to sentence people to certain archaic, draconian sentences, but they have no choice because their hands are tied. So this gives the judges discretion. This makes the criminal procedure much more fair and appropriate, and allow people to be sentenced that way. Lastly, I'll say that these bills give hope to our incarcerated loved ones. It will transform the prison culture as we know it. When you give a person hope who's incarcerated, that is the catalyst to help a person to get more rehabilitative and get on that process. Department of Corrections is not about that at this moment, unfortunately. And so when you give a person hope, they will take it, and then this makes us safe. And then we need to have a more productive remedy to get our folks home a lot faster and quicker. We do not have an understaffing problem. We have an overpopulated problem of humans that are incarcerated. So this is the remedy that will facilitate not only a better prison environment, but more importantly, help our family members and loved ones become whole. Because just as the brother mentioned earlier, I also received calls from family members and loved ones, and they're looking for hope. Right now, they don't even know if their loved ones is going to come home alive. So these bills will prevent the next Robert Brooks incident, and definitely will not allow a situation like that happened with Messiah last weekend to occur as well. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you so much. I too am a practitioner of hope, because how else, could we put forward suggestions and garner that change? So thank you again so much. I want to thank you all also for joining us. Please feel free to use the chat for questions, to asking questions. We will have our Q&A session start now with our speakers. A press release with the full link to this Zoom recording will be distributed to the press following this press conference. If you are a member of the press, please share your name and your outlet when you are asking your question. And if you have direct experience, please also share that in the chat, because we want to hear that as well. Thank you. Let me see. Are there any final thoughts, Victor or Stanley or Thomas, that you might have?
Yeah, I do. Thank you so very much for this platform. I'd like to just, add in that we all know that prisons and jails are none other than an extension of slavery carried out in a different way. And it's not about rehabilitation, it's about punishment. And if you, and I think that, yes, I believe there should be systems of accountability. And I think that those systems of accountability should be humane and transformative and restorative, not just punitive. If you expect a person to come out better than they were before they went in, you have to create those concrete pathways in order for that to happen. When you talk about our carceral system and what it's built upon and how it's carried out, people go in oftentimes with issues that they didn't have before they went in, especially when we look at mental health, treatment needs, right? When you talk about education, vocational skills and needs, these are the type of things that people need to be able to come back to our society as different people. And as my colleague spoke about the educational piece, that's a very important piece. And it's proven, that, people that have educational opportunities, vocational skills opportunity, they have a great likelihood of succeeding when they are returned to our society. So I say that, our system of incarceration should be more transformed. It should not be abusive. It should not be tortured. People are not sentenced to torture, nor are they sentenced to death. They are sentenced to accountability. And we all know there is two different systems of accountability. Case in point, historically, prisons, violent, abusive, racist, and when you are exposed to this type of treatment, I don't see how that makes you a better person. I don't even see how that creates an opportunity for you to come out a better person. So I just say that we need to look at what needs to happen. My colleagues spoke about remedies to this here, and I think we better look at really how we need to be able to transform. And of course, we definitely need to abolish, but there's a system that we need to take in order to get to that place and that point. So thank you very much for hearing
Thank
me.
you.
Can
Thank
I
you,
add on,
Victor.
just
Please,
jump
Stanley,
in
share
real
your
quick?
final thoughts.
Yeah, like Victor, I served time in solitary confinement, and I was younger when I did it. But there's a habit that came out of solitary confinement from being in there that stuck with me to today. That when you confined in those cells and you placed into those little boxes and you have no one to talk to, you begin to talk to yourself. You begin to have conversations with yourself. You may not answer yourself, but you begin to speak out loud just so you can hear another voice, another human voice. And that, from my time being in solitary confinement, have stuck with me to the day where I find myself, even as a free man, talking out loud. And if anybody around me, sometimes I make the joke, you shouldn't be listening to my conversation because I'm talking to myself. But that is what came from being in solitary confinement. And as an elder adult coming out of prison now and understanding what it does to you, that when we talk about pathways, along with the bills that Thomas mentioned, we need to also pass the elder bill, which says that anybody 55 and older and who've been in prison for 15 or more years should be given the opportunity to go to their immediate parole board to make their case for release. We're not saying release anybody, but give them the opportunity to make their case for release, because we recognize that the people that will immediately benefit from this bill is people who've been incarcerated since they late teens or early 20s. So they already passed the 15-year threshold of being in jail for 15. In some cases, some of them have been in jail for 40 years, 50 years, and they have no pathways for relief. So the elder bill will give them that opportunity, that hope that Thomas talked about. The other bill is the phantom parole bill that says that anybody, when they come to the board, judge them on the merit of who they are now as opposed to who they were 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, because we recognize that the crime will never change, but the individual can, based on the education, based on aging out of crime, based on so many different factors where you see that elder adults, formerly incarcerated individuals, have the lowest recidivism rate. So why wouldn't you give them this common sense, pass these common sense laws and allow them the opportunity to make their case for release? And again, I thank everybody for listening to us and giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you all so much. We are thankful for you to come out for this Zoom press conference, and for all of those who care about these issues, individuals and press, I would like to shift the conversation just quickly to Thomas, if he could answer one question that we did have that was about how programming is being impacted, and also any final thoughts that you have for lawmakers to take away. We want to get that question answered, and also be able to give people their time back. So thank you so much, Thomas, for answering that.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a very monumental moment right now. Crises calls for leadership. It calls for vision. It calls for hope, and more importantly, it takes political will and courage. So, as you've heard today, we have the remedy. Now is the time that our lawmakers, people we elected, to have leadership in times of crises, to do it. When you look over history, you'll find that every time there was a crisis moment, greatness came to the forefront. And to sit back, to cower, to not do anything in this moment to help human beings, is an indictment on folks that we have elected. So I would implore them to move expediently. This is a humanitarian crisis. What's going on the inside is unacceptable. Nobody should be confined to a cage, a 6x10 cage, for 23, 24 hours a day. It's inhumane. It's not good for human psyche. It's not good for productivity. So these bills that we're saying will encourage folks on the inside to participate in programs, to do things to help become better. I said it earlier that this is where aha moments happen at. This is where you get it. This is where you begin to learn about yourself. This is where your citizenship get raised. So we expect the Department of Corrections to do just that, and unfortunately, it hasn't. Somebody had mentioned earlier when I was in a meeting that Department of Corrections and Community Solutions, right? I chuckled and said, no, they're more focused on supervision, but they should be about solutions. So we have the solutions right now, which is get folks out of cells, participating in programs, and allow them to work themselves home.
Sorry, but to the question that we had in the Q&A tab, I just want to nail down specifically, how is it that programs are interrupted by strikes and other correctional staff behaviors? And also, how can we expand quality programming beyond the facilities that are closest to major cities? Both of those questions came in.
Got you. So I would just say right now with the strike happening, there is no programming, there is no contact, there is no interaction with staff. Folks that were in college working themselves to graduate, right, to give themselves more opportunities upon release, have been interrupted. They're not even allowed to do things through the mail. People aren't getting out and interacting with instructors. And I'll tell you, that's where those great moments happen at, where you're talking to a citizen, to somebody who can come teach you something to make yourself better, to participate in your citizenship. That's not happening. And on top of not even interacting with programs, not interacting with your family and loved ones, that's what keeps you sane, right? This is what keeps you connected. This is what keeps your hope going when you know that your family is connected. Because I'll tell you this, incarceration isn't just about the incarcerated individual, it's about their family and loved ones as well. So even more families and loved ones are being now harmed and have to carry trauma because they cannot be connected to their loved ones. And then lastly, things like medication. People need medication, right, to get to life, to make themselves better. That has been interrupted. Food, access to good food, right, to a good meal is also a part of human growth, elevation, and being moving forward. That has even been interrupted. So this whole strike has not just harmed incarcerated individuals, it has harmed humanity. And again, this is why we are saying our leadership needs to step in and lead. Stop caving and folding to opposition and actually put these things back in place if we're serious. And lastly, I would say, before I kick it back to you, $3 billion is being spent on a system that is not only harming folks, injuring humanity, and now we know murdering our citizens from New York that we've been claiming for decades.
Thank you. Powerful words, Victor, Stanley, Thomas. Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing your work. Thank you for sharing the messages that you are getting. And thank you for being such strong partners in the state of New York. Again, we will send out the recording along with the press release to members of the press who have joined us. And we are thankful for everyone's time this morning and especially your attention to this crisis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.